It was good to do about diversity of life again, because I didn't understand the first time. So there's three domains. These are archaea, eubacteria, and eukaryotes. Eukarya. Don't know like what. Three domains: archaea, eubacteria. So basically, archaea, bacteria, and eukarya are the three domains. Maybe we should like start like talking about the taxonomy divisions. Bro, this chair's like making it on it. But it goes, Dear King Philip came over for great soup. So the most broadest thing is deer, so D domain, and there's three domains. There's domain archaea, domain eukarya, domain archaea, domain eukarya, and domain bacteria or eubacteria. And then, we could have like the two cell types, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So eukaryotes are going to be the eukarya, and then prokarya, like prokaryotic cells, are going to be archaea and eubacteria. So what is the nucleoid? The nucleoid is where, because in prokaryotes they don't have any membrane, so they don't have a nucleus. So the nucleoid is just the area of where genetic information, DNA, is held. There's also no introns in prokaryotic DNA, meaning it has like higher gene density, but that's like some other topic. So now pili and fimbriae are things that are on prokaryotes, and they're just used for adhesion, and yeah. Now the flagella in prokaryotes is made out of, I'm closing my eyes right now, flagellin, and then for eukaryotes is made out of tubulin. So that's like a key difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So to recap, basically there's archaea, eubacteria, eukarya, two cell types, prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and two main differences between the flagella. One is made of flagellin, one is made of tubulin. So there's two ways to categorize how life obtains energy. So there's autotrophs and heterotrophs. So what are heterotrophs? They are things that gain energy by consuming others. Autotrophs gain energy by making their own energy. So plants. Classifying oxygen usage. There's three types of like classifying. So we have three different options, right? We could be completely reliant on oxygen, we could be detrimental to oxygen, and we could do both. So obligate anaerobe is the term used to say that we depend on oxygen. Obligate anaerobe means that we cannot have oxygen, that means oxygen is detrimental to us. And then facultative can do, like, it does aerobic, but it can also do anaerobic if there's no O2. So it could do both. So now, talking about archaea now, the first domain. These are the simplest, and this is the oldest domain. So archaea is like the oldest and simplest one. It is prokaryotic with eukaryotic characteristics. See, this is what I'm kind of confused about. So archaea is it's like a mix, but it's like a prokaryotic cell type, but it still has eukaryotic traits. So eukaryotic characteristics is that it has no peptidoglycan. It has ether linkage rather than ester linkage. It also has histone proteins like eukaryotes. It has introns, and the ribosomes are different compared to bacteria or eubacteria. So that means the antibiotics that we use for bacteria are not effective to to archaea. However, these archaea, they're not really like viral, like they don't really hurt, like they're not bad for us. So there's three main types of archaea that we should know. There's thermophiles, thermophiles, methanogens, and halophiles, so salt loving. So halophiles, they like salt, like the halogens. Thermophiles, they work in good temperatures. Methanogens, they produce methane, and they are like in swamps, our digestive tract, etc. Okay, so methanogens are also obligate anaerobes. Okay, so methanogens are obligate anaerobes, produce methane in the GI tract and swamps. Thermophiles are heat lovers, chemoautotrophs. And then halophiles can be both aerobic and anaerobic, photosynthetic or heterotrophic. So they could just basically be anything. Okay, now moving on to domain eubacteria. So these are prokaryotic cell types. They have a peptidoglycan cell wall as compared to the archaea with no peptidoglycan. But now with this peptidoglycan cell wall, we can determine two main characteristics, or like divide them into two groups. So there's gram positive and there's gram negative. So gram positive means that you have teichoic acid. So having teichoic acid means you have a thick peptidoglycan layer with no outer membrane. No outer membrane, no lipopolysaccharide membrane, no endotoxins. That means that you stain dark purple, and yeah. So now negative is you don't really get stains, so you're pink. So you have a thin peptidoglycan layer, but you have an outer membrane of lipopolysaccharides which contain endotoxins. So if the cell dies, it'll just release endotoxins and cause death to whatever consumed it. It has no teichoic acid because it can't have everything. So yeah, so it's either you have teichoic acid and don't have the lipopolysaccharide, or you don't have teichoic, or if you have teichoic and you have no LPS. Your bacteria also have no histones. They have different ribosomes which are affected by antibiotics, and they also use endospores. Endospores are basically just they're like a dormant stage of bacteria, like a seed, and they'll just stay dormant until like favorable conditions. So now there's nomenclature for bacteria. So I swear I tried to remember this before, but now I just forgot. So there's bacilli, which is like rod shaped. There's coccus, which is spear, like spear. Then there's spirality, or spiralum, which is spiral. Strepto is as a chain, and then Staphylos cluster. Okay, so the two for arrangement, there's strepto and staphylum. Staphyl and strepto. So strepto is linear chains. Staphyl is cluster. Staphyl is like a weird. Okay, staphyl, cluster, strepto, linear, coccus, spear, bacilli, rod, spiralium, spiral. Okay, so strepto, staphyl, spiralium, bacilli, coccus. Okay, so there's two types of bacteria. Nitrogen giving, like two examples of bacteria. There's nitrogen fixing, like which is in the like root nodes of freaking legumes, and then there's also cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae, is a bacteria. It's not considered eukaryotic. So for reproduction in bacteria, there's three types for genetic recombination. So there's conjugation, which is basically just like normal, like you put a plasmid from one to the other through the pilus. What is plasmid? It's accessory DNA. It's found outside of the genome. There's transformation, which is just when you heat up the membrane, the genetic information from outside the cell will just come into the cell and be incorporated. That's how we make hormones, well, not hormones, but like insulin and stuff like that. Then there is transduction, which is just using a virus. Viruses are non-living, so the basic structure, there's the nucleic acid and there's the capsid. So capsid, what separates and protects the genetic information of the virus. Bacteriophage will have a sheath, which is what ejects the viral genome, and tail fibers, which helps with the recognition and attachment. Others will have viral envelope, health of infection. I really don't understand that part. I don't really kind of understand, I don't really know. I feel like it's kind of low yield, but I don't know. So now we finished going over the kingdoms, or the domains. So we have archaea, we have eubacteria, and then we also have eubacteria, archaea, and now we have eukarya. We're going to be looking over the four main kingdoms of eukarya. So remember, my dear king, dear King Philip, so domain, and now we're looking at kingdom of eukarya. So there's four main kingdoms under eukarya. I only went through three of them because Animalia is just rape, so we're not going to look over that. We're going to just look over Protista and fungi, then also plantae. So to start with Protista, most of these are unicellular. They could be autotrophic or heterotrophic. They'll usually be present in the symbiotic relationships with other things. And the key thing is that they are in moist environments. They're always in like aquatic areas, like, just aquatic areas. They need that moisture. So there's three types of protists that we should know. There's fungus, animal, and plant-like. So basically it's just the other three kingdoms, but it's like the mini version of it. So fungus-like, these are also called water/slime molds, not to be confused with actual fungus, which is just called molds. So water and slime molds, those are for fungus-like protists, which means they are unicellular, and they're just like, not fully. So a key difference between fungus and fungus-like protists is that they do not have chitin. Fungus-like do not have chitin, while fungus will have chitin. The ways they're similar is that they are decomposers, and they also do spore reproduction. So now going on to animal-like, these are also known as protozoa. So protozoa basically equals animal-like protist. So why are they similar to animals? Well, they have high motility, which is through cilia or flagella, and they're also heterotrophic, which they do through phagocytosis. All of these are single-celled. So there's three types of animal-like. There's foraminifera. I really don't. I feel like this is so niche that you probably don't even know this, but might as well know. So three types. There's foraminifera, which produces a shell at the sea bottom or surface. There's paramecium, which is unicellular ciliate, and it uses cilia to move. I remember in my bio lab we looked at these. There's amoeboids, which use pseudopodia, so it's just extending their cytoplasm to move. And then there's apicocomplexans, which are parasites of animals. The plasmodium is what causes malaria. So, yeah, I feel like it's a bit specific, but yeah. Anyways, that's all for animal-like. Now looking at plant-like, the way they're similar is they're photosynthetic, which means they have chloroplast. That's like the similarity. And then the difference is that protists will lack the vascular system. Now in plantae, we're going to be talking about one of the types that I think it's called it's not brachiophytes, it's like trapheophytes, and that includes plant-like protists because these plant-like protists do not have vascular systems. They don't have leaves, they don't have roots, they don't, extend. So some examples of this are dinoflagellates. So this is a unicellular plant-like protist and it has two flagella. That's why it's called diflagella. This causes red tide and is parasitic. There's the euglenoid, which are flagellates, unicellular. Some are photosynthetic, but the main thing about euglenoids is that they have a pellicle, which are protein strips beneath the cell membrane. There's also diatoms. Diatoms are unicellular type of algae that clump together. So now that brings to the question, what is algae? Well, algae is an informal group. It's not really recognized in the Linnaean taxonomy, but it's just kind of a distinct group. So it could be unicellular or multicellular. Multicellular will be eukaryotic, uni will be prokaryotic. And the main thing is that they need to be photosynthetic, but they're not exactly plant tissue. They don't have like roots, they don't have leaves, things like that. They're just photosynthetic. So there's two phylum of plant-like protists that we can break them into. We're going to be talking about those in Animalia too, because there's multiple phylums, things like Chordata, Rotifera, and all that we have to look through, which is going to be like in 2 days, because I'm not doing that tomorrow. But two phylum of plant-like protists, those are going to be Chlorophyta and Rhodophyta. The main two, it's just one is red and one's green. So Chlorophyta is the green one, Rhodophyta is the red one. The main difference, Chlorophyta can be uni or multi, Rhodophyta can be all multicellular, with no flagella. Fungi. So fungi, three examples: mushroom, molds, and yeast. So that's the difference between fungi and protista. Fungus-like protists are called slime or water molds. Fungi are just molds. So the word mycota refers to the fungi phylum, so it's not really that important. So fungi relations, there's two that we should probably know. I don't know who's we, but it's me, bro. Lichens and mycorrhiza. So lichens, bro, I got a couple of practice questions about lichens and I really just keep on messing it up. But this is between fungi and algae. So fungi will provide the structural protection and algae will provide the sugar. Mycorrhiza is just the roots of plants and then just fungi. So now going on to what determines if something is like fungi. Well, first it'll have the chitin cell wall. They're also all saprophytes, meaning that they are decomposers and they're all heterotrophic. And they also have something called hyphae, which are also called filaments. So now these hyphae will determine, or maybe not. I feel like these hyphae are what determine what the two types of fungi are. So there's unicellular fungi and multicellular fungi. So unicellular means non-filamentous. These are like yeast, unicellular. They are facultative anaerobic, so they can do both, and they produce via budding. Multicellular or filamentous, those are molds, not molds, I'll just keep reminding myself. They're aerobic, but they can both do asexual or sexual reproduction. So asexual, they do spores and fragmentation. Sexual, they do plasmogamy, which is the fusion of two hyphae and then the cytoplasm fuse. Then there's karyogamy, which is when the nuclei fuse, and then meiosis, which is when you produce spores from that diploid thing. So what is unique about this group? These will have a mycelium, which is a network of hyphae that connect the fungi together. That's like the bottom of mushrooms. So there's coenocytic, which means that they're all multinucleated, no division. There's septate, which they have cell walls, which will separate the hyphae. And then there's haustoria, which is just a kind of parasite. Now going on to plantae. So the key traits of plantae, as you can imagine, they're photosynthetic. They have cellulose in their cell walls. They're multicellular, and they do asexual and sexual reproduction through a specific means of alternation of generations. So now, what is alternations of generations? Basically means that plants have two life stages, and they'll cycle between being a spermatophyte and a gametophyte. So what does this mean? So gametophyte is haploid. Gametophyte, what will a gametophyte do? So a gametophyte is haploid. It'll release haploids via kind of like spores, and then those gametes can fuse with others to make a diploid zygote. So haploid, then we got diploid zygote. That zygote will undergo mitosis, and you'll become a sporophyte, which is diploid. So a sporophyte is basically a diploid, like a mature diploid. It'll release spores through meiosis. So the sporophyte will undergo meiosis to produce spores. Those spores will then go through mitosis to form a gametophyte. Then those gametophytes will then release gametes. Gametes will fuse together, and it'll just keep on rotating. Now, plants will prefer to be in one of two stages. They won't keep on switching between, but they'll prefer one. So now we move on to how we classify plants. So there's 4 main ways we separate them. So the first question we ask is, do they have a plant body? Are they differentiated? If yes, they are called a bryophyte or a tracheophyte. So maybe it's easier just to say no. So a plant body, no differentiation, then you are a thallophyte. That's basically algae. They're the simplest form of plant, no vascular system, can be bacteria or protist, doesn't matter. It's a general term. So now if we move on to the next requirement, if there's a vascular system, so wait, the main thing is to know, okay, so a thallophyte has no differentiated body parts. Now we move on to a vascular system. So if you do not have a vascular system, then you call it a bryophyte. This means you are differentiated, but you don't have roots, you don't have xylem, you don't have phloem. You're just like a body of mass, and that because of that, you can't really transport nutrients throughout your body, right? So you have to grow horizontally. They're going to have rhizoids underneath to absorb water rather than roots, and they are dominant in the gametophyte stage. So again, we just classified that this does have a plant body, so it's differentiated. If it weren't to have a plant body, it would be called a thallophyte. Now we got bryophyte, which is differentiated but it does not have a vascular system. Then we got tracheophytes, which are differentiated and have a vascular system. These will go vertically because they have the xylem and the phloem. They are dominant in the sporophyte. So think about it like this. Gametophytes are single, so bryophytes are kind of like depressing, so yes. Tracheophytes, they're like getting stronger, so they are differentiated. They got vascular, so they're like sporophyte, like they're active. Now we have seed formation. Do you make seeds or do you make seeds? So seed bearing only happens in tracheophytes. So if you do not do seed formation, you are a seedless tracheophyte. If yes, then you are a seed bearing tracheophyte. Pretty simple, yeah? So now flowers. Do you have them? If yes, you are called an angiosperm. If no, then you're called a gymnosperm. So no equals gymnosperm, which means you have naked seeds. That means like you just make like pine cones and stuff. These will be dominant in the sporophyte. Now, if yes, you make angiosperms, you have flowers, so you have seeds in the fruit, which is not naked. So these will undergo double fertilization as well, which basically means that, you know, two sperm cells, like two male cells, can fuse to one kind of female, like kind of not fuse to one specific, but one sperm cell will go to the embryo with an egg, like the actual way it's supposed to happen, then the other one will just be a freak and fuse with a polar nuclei to form the endosperm. There's two types of angio. There's monocots and dicots. So monocots have one cartilodon. They have parallel veins. They're scattered vascular and flowers in 3x. I don't really know how to remember this. Dicots are two cartilodons. They have net veins, ring vascular system, flowers in 4 or 5 times, 4 or 5 multiples. So, yep, that's all.